Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Vader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Robert Mayhew, president of Mayhew Marketing Group. And Robert's one of these guys, and it's just, as you'll hear through our interview, it's just kind of funny how many different people we knew and, how many different crossing points we had. So it was really, it was just kind of serendipitous that we were able to get together and do a show together. But I'm telling you right now, I love listening to young entrepreneurs who are, they want to put in the work. And I think, sometimes millennials get this kind of bad rap about, that entry-level CEO position and entitlement and all these things. And if you listen to Robert, he recognized that by putting in the work and really listening to some of the mentors he's had in his life and really following in their footsteps, he's built an amazing business. And that business is open to all. You don't have to be born into it. You can actually, start in the warehouse, come over from, man, I don't want to flip pizzas anymore. So, maybe how about if I work in a warehouse or a distribution company and see where that leads me? And all of a sudden now, at 39 years old, here he owns his agency. They're in a couple different markets. They have some pretty spectacular lines. He was invited on to the advisory council of a marketing group that I'm very familiar with. And so I think it's just a testament to, how people, if they're willing to put in the effort without the guaranteed results, it's just, I'm going to put in the effort and see what happens. And my father used to always say, chase the work and the money will follow. And that's really what I saw in Robert and what I see and hear out of his mouth. So it was an absolute pleasure to speak with him, and I hope you enjoy the interview. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSequel Distribution Software. InSequel prides themselves on their rapid response customer support team. They maintain a very low 1 customer support person per 20 user ratio. Now, I have a long history with this company. I met the lead developer several years ago when he attended my inventory management seminar. He didn't just attend, he absorbed the content. Every couple of years, I head up to their Michigan headquarters to talk about product enhancements and see what they're up to. I always come away impressed. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSequel Distribution Software at www.insequel.com. That's INXSQL.com. Hey, Robert, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today.
Oh, Jason, thanks for having me.
So, as you know, you've listened to the show a couple of times. You've been around it a little bit, seen what I kind of the way I put these things together. I love to dive into the story, man. How exactly did you get involved in distribution, and why would you get involved with distribution? So, man, take it away. Give us a little history lesson on yourself.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. It's actually a funny story, and I'd say probably pizza is the right answer.
Pizza? All right.
I was making pizza for a living, putting myself through college. A real good friend of mine, childhood friend of mine, Tyson Clayton, who I know you're familiar with.
Very familiar with that family. Yeah, absolutely.
His father, Monty, owned a STAFDA distributorship that at the time I had no idea what that meant. I just knew I could get weekends off and I could work in a warehouse. And so I signed up. Quickly ended up being a pretty vital part of that operation. Like your typical STAFDA distributor, they ran lean and mean.
Yeah.
They were doing a great business. It was during the peak ARM loan progression of the housing market, in which the Las Vegas, Southern Nevada, Las Vegas market was a pretty inflated piece of. And these guys sold framing contractors, roofers, stucco guys, trim guys, grade A, typical STAFDA distributor, like where it all started, right? Servicing the tools,
sure,
selling the fasteners, construction hardware, things like that.
Going out on the job site, looking for opportunities and oh yeah.
Yeah. So I picked it up pretty quick, at least, how to load a truck, how to pack a pallet, how to pull a hardware package. And, at that time I was about 20 years old and I saw that, man, there's a good business here. There's a lot of stuff going in and out and there's not a lot of people. And at that time, I wouldn't say I was too bright, but I was intelligent enough to realize that this was a lucrative business. As I progressed in that, I think it was about 2 weeks, I became the warehouse manager in short order. And then about a month after that, a little company called Home Depot and their pro arm of their business called Whitecap at the time actually had made the acquisition of Monty's business.
I remember that. Oh yeah. I mean, I remember when Monty decided, of course we all give people a bad time. We're like, but then secretly we're all jealous at the same time. It's like when they sell these companies, oh, you sold out. It's like, yeah, I'm kind of jealous about what you did. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And I mean, great acquisition on their part too. And for Monty, good luck getting that guy to stop working. He's still pumping here.
Oh, he is. No, I talked to him recently and he's not ready to hang up the cleats yet.
Yeah. And Tyson has certainly built a beautiful career off of that too. And they've diversified it. But at the time, I was about the only guy that really knew what was going on and could actually function a computer. And as they did kind of an ERP change from what we were using to putting us onto the Whitecap system, man, I ended up doing everything. I did the shipping and receiving. I mean, I was invoicing. I was pulling most of the orders. I was scheduling my delivery drivers. I was directing my other warehouse employees. I did just about everything except for the sales.
What was it like, working with the Access Fasteners, with, the smaller entity, privately held, very nimble, extremely nimble, and you could progress really quickly. Then moving into a pretty decent sized corporate entity at the time. What was that transition like? I mean, what did it feel like? I mean, it seems like, you seem to adapt well in the technology side, but what was the culture like?
It was a weird interim period because we still had the soul, as I would call it, of, our small company, but we had so much more resources behind us. We had so much more access to items that we just never had access or focus on before. And so it was very good for the progression. And you still had a sense of like, well, we came from here. And as they transitioned us into a full-blown Whitecap, man, it was a little bit of shock to everyone. Sure. And we started having much more robust HR policies and much more strict processes. And in reality, we didn't climb on the racking and do stuff we weren't supposed to. We actually got forklift certified, things like that. From that point, I realized quickly within that system that I wanted to be in sales. And so I said, hey, put me on the counter. I was fortunate that a lot of our old customers from Access remembered me. I knew the stuff they needed. Whitecap was a little more concrete focused at that time. And so it served me really well because I had almost a cult following at the counter there. I'd have a line out the door and they'd wait for me to put together the hardware packages and read the prints with them and figure out what they needed. And from that point, I really just got stung by the sales bug. And from there, I realized, oh man, this is where I need to be. And from there, I ended up getting recruited by a large manufacturer's rep agency based out of Southern California by the name of Canal Western. Worked with those folks and was recruited by Bob Patch and Dave Israelson, went over to that group, worked with them for quite some time. I was tasked with building the Las Vegas market out. And, I had a large partner that they were putting a strategic focus on by the name of Fasteners Inc., very large Evergreen member.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I know the Mandis family. Absolutely.
Know them well.
Yeah,
and, so Fasteners Inc., PCS, toolup.com, little website. And met a gentleman by the name of Keith Manis, who ended up being a great mentor to me and worked with his son closely. We're similar age, Mike Manis and I. And from there, just flourished in the rep world. I loved having multiple lines. I loved having multiple distribution partners. I loved having multiple manufacturer partners, always a place to pivot. And where I really got joy out of being in that role was that I'd wake up, roll out of bed, and pure creativity would take place. Nobody was telling me what my task was. Nobody was telling me which line to focus on. That was for me to decide and to design. And I think that really, for me, just drove the motivation to continue to progress. And over the years, I ended up starting my own rep agency, dabbled into some different industries, used that model in different industries where it worked, different channels of business, and then ultimately proceeded down the path of having my own agency that I was only going to do Vegas, and I was just going to own Vegas. And
just doesn't work like that. Yeah,
it doesn't. And the opportunities continue to come. And then, now we've expanded out.
Sure.
We're up to 7 employees, a couple of warehouses, pretty sizable one in Phoenix, Arizona. And now we cover the entire Southwest. So California, Arizona, Nevada. And that's the short version of the story of how we got here.
Robert, and I appreciate, that story because first of all, you worked out in a wholesale distribution company. You started there, and when you transitioned into the agency side, you talk about creativity, and I think obviously a very eat what you kill type of mentality. Whatever you sell, you get a piece of, and that's very pure. I mean, there's just something extremely pure about that. But I guess what I'm curious about, though, is what did you find was the biggest challenge when you moved away from that white cap model and the traditional wholesale distribution side to the agency world? What was that big stumbling block, if you will?
I think it ultimately is wrapped around the idea that I had customers coming to me for a solution that I had in stock, right? I had it ready. They needed it. Now I was put in this position where not only did I have to get past the gatekeeper that was trying to keep me out from the purchasing department, I had to develop relationships with the outside sales folks, get them to trust me and get them to really embrace that they would have proper support with the brands I was representing, because the difference between that wasn't that I had this product that they were coming to get and I had it in multiple brands. It was that I was going in and I was trying to get my brand positioned. I was trying to convert other brands and categories over to categories that I had in the brand that I was representing, and breaking through that process and learning that process and how it rolls up and down, vertically and then even horizontally out to the team. Gosh, what a great and valuable lesson. And I'll tell you, the time I spent at distribution and those multiple tasks I was doing during that first transition from access to white cap, I will tell you that it was just the most valuable experience I could ever have, because I understood the challenges. I understood each person's position there. I made it a point to go and say hello and introduce myself to each warehouse guy, the guy that's shipping my product, the guy that's receiving my product, not just that key decision maker, not just that person at the counter I needed, everyone, because I remember being that guy. I remember seeing the vendor reps come by and pass by me and big league me to the guy that was actually going to cut the PO, the power of the pad, as we call it in the industry, right?
Sure.
So I'd say that the biggest stumbling block was realizing, man, how do I go take something that they already have and they're already selling, and how do I solution design a better value and give them a reason to stock and utilize the brand that I was selling?
I'm glad you mentioned the going out and seeing the other people in the organization. As I just taught that class, did that rep training, and that's just one of those key messages is wholesale distributors promote from within. I mean, let's just face it, and if you know that and you think about that as the rep to that business, if you spend time out there in that warehouse and in that counter environment, those are going to be key decision makers somewhere down the line. And you're really planting seeds for a longer relationship with that organization.
And building rapport. The rapport that you build with these folks is almost compounding interest down the road. Always been super mindful of that. And for my whole team, that's something that we always say. And it's the old trick in the industry where you say, if you went through the front door, that was the wrong door. When we're out visiting end users or distributors, we're going through the back door into the warehouse. We know Bill is back there. I know what his favorite, donuts are, and I know his kids' names and that. And you're exactly right. And I think it's something that's special with our industry is that there is a lot of promotion from within. And I've even heard that, talked about on the podcast before. It's a truly special thing in our world. And I think it's a testament to the pure entrepreneurship that exists in the world of distribution. And you mentioned that eat what you kill piece. I mean, one of the most valuable things I ever learned at 22 years old was I digested eat what you kill. And as I told you, it's like, you'd look at this thing as a rep and you'd go, man, aren't you guys on 30-day contracts? Isn't that scary? And I was like, well, yeah, it's scary, but like, couldn't your job lay you off today and you'd be lucky if they gave you 2 weeks pay? I've got a scenario where I'm going to get paid for 30 days. And hey, if I don't represent Coke anymore, I can always rep Pepsi. RC Cola sells a lot. Shasta still sells a lot.
Yeah.
I love the cola analogy when we talk about the rep
Sure.
world. So it's one of my go-tos, but it's something that's special about it.
For sure. And we do talk about that 30-day contract as a very kind of a negative thing. And I'm glad you have a kind of a more positive spin on it because I've never had one. I mean, it's always bothered me. And I'm thinking, especially if you've spent a couple of years, really pioneering a line and driving it in. And then that manufacturer gets a new VP and says, you know what, I don't like agencies anymore. We're going direct. That's a tough hit.
It happens all the time. And sometimes it's completely out of anybody that you would have thought kind of held the keys to the castles. It's out of their sphere. I do like that. I think it serves well in the industry currently because we're seeing so much influence from private equity that's acquiring some of the manufacturers.
Yes.
And now even down to the distributor level. Well, reps represent fixed costs, and private equity really likes fixed costs. It's predictable. It's budgetable, for lack of a better term, right? So I think that's something that we lean on in transitioning the other way from a direct sales force to an independent strategy is that you don't have the variables. You don't have the HR spends. You don't have the, man, this guy wrecked the company truck. You don't have those kind of things. It's a predictable cost. And if you can predict it, you can forecast it, you can budget it, and you can model around it. I tell people all the time, build my costs into your price models.
Absolutely.
Easy as that. And I love that idea. I always say it's the best deal anybody offered. It's like, you don't even have to pay me until I've already made you much more than you're ever going to pay me. Who says no to that deal?
Right. That's not a bad pitch, man. That's really not a bad pitch. A couple of thoughts here. As you've transitioned into building your own agency and you've been successful and it drug you to another market and you're not saying no enough, but that's all right. That's just kind of, that's hard to do sometimes. So when is it too many lines? So I was playing golf with a good friend of mine earlier this year, and he has a rep agency in the HVAC space. I remember when he started out, he left a really kind of a big distributor. Actually, he's very similar story, but he left a big distributor, went into the agency world with a partner. And, he said, one of the biggest struggles is time management. He's got 30 lines. And so it's really hard to give each one of them a piece.
Yeah, great question. I always say the Mendoza line's at 15.
Okay. All right.
I think that's the Mendoza line. And baseball fans understand that term.
Gotcha.
But basically saying, at 15 is where it starts to get to a point that you can't just look at the overall. You have to deep dive the details, and you have to understand bandwidth spend, and you have to understand like, hey, is it bigger in this market where you have more resources? Is it bigger in this channel where you have less resources? Are you accomplishing the goals ultimately of the manufacturer? And at the end of the day, I think it's most of the reps, I don't think we really want to check that we haven't earned. And that's probably counterintuitive to what most people would think, but ultimately, I'm a deep believer in salesman karma. You got to keep that clean. Beyond that, I just think nobody wants to be average. How do you display excellence? Well, it needs attention, and it does need that time management. Now, I don't think that there's one answer for that as a metric. I know I can speak for myself. I think that 15 is the point that I really start to say, okay, but you will see that there's scenarios where you've got a buddy that's a regional manager over here, and sometimes it's just good press for them to say they have the coverage and they don't need as much out of you. It's a smaller segment, and I think that's really the better way to measure it. But ultimately, what do we all get? We get how many lines you're representing. And I think that's one thing we've been mindful of as an agency and it's something, quite frankly, we sell on, is that we don't want to be the agency that has 50 lines. We want to be the agency that has 10, 15 really strong relationships that are long-term, profitable, that we can lay down the tracks for that compounding interest effect that we were talking about and not have it get flipped over in 2 years because a new management group came in.
Absolutely agree. I think that when you start to get up into those higher numbers, there's a dilution. There's a dilution of attention. There's just no way around it. Even if you do hire specialists in your organization and maybe they spend time on safety, for example, or maybe more down the electrical train. But still, I think there can be a dilution. That's got to be from a principle of an agency. That's got to be something that you have to be very mindful of.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things we've always said is there's a lot of really good, I tend to try to not use military analogies, but it just works for this.
Okay.
So forgive me, I'm not stealing valor or anything like that. My father served the country 43 years, so I'm going to take liberties. What we say is there's great armies out there, but that's not what we do. We're special forces. You send us in with a direct objective. This is the spot we want you to be in, and we want you to be tactical, strategic, and we want a certain level of communication on that, the intel. And I think that that's how we promote ourselves. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. I just think there are a couple different things. A lot of people need an army, but most of the time I think we see that business is segmented regionally, particularly for performance metrics and particularly for the bonus metrics of, your regional VP or your regional manager or your national sales manager and all the way up. And combining those together is what ultimately gets the overall revenue generation and what everyone's judged off as a total company. So I think that that's how we have kind of carved out our path and our identity.
I wanted to take a kind of a segue here. One of the things you and I kind of had spoken about off air is really the entrepreneurship built into wholesale distribution and what it, that compounding effect of wholesale distribution, what it does for other industries. So would you mind speaking about that a little bit and maybe even the restaurant analogy you were talking about earlier?
Yeah. So I think part of the distribution world, what I've seen, and particularly in the channel that we're in, is some of the purest forms of entrepreneurship. I mean, how many stories in that world are there of this guy started out of his garage? He started out of the back of a truck. I know $100 million businesses now that started out of the back of somebody's trunk, or they drove around a box truck and they were fixing hoses and whatnot on the job site as they were building houses. And I think that it's such a pure form of entrepreneurship in this country. And it teaches you so much from top to bottom that by the time you get through that, you almost feel like, man, I can apply this in any channel ever. I remember distinctly sitting back and talking to some friends that are in different industries. And I start rapping about different terminology and programming and price modeling and whatnot and throughput costs and things like that. And they're just looking at me like, what are you saying? And I'm like, wait, you guys don't know this stuff? And they're like, no. And I guess I always assumed like everybody knew this stuff. But what I've realized is like people take it for granted all the time. And to that restaurant analogy we were talking about is I use Vegas as a case study. I'm a Vegas native. I'm born and raised in Vegas. I'm a Vegas guy.
You are a unicorn, my man, but I think it makes you uniquely able to really serve that world as well.
For sure. And it is, we're becoming a big boy metro now. It's now a big city, but we always say it's a small town. So it has that factor. But if you compare us from size and what level of culinary options we have, we are on par with the Chicagos, the New York Cities, the Londons, Miamis, some of the biggest, best metros and some of the best food towns in the world. And I think it's a testament to how valuable wholesale distribution is. It's because you have all these strip restaurants, high-end restaurants, and they're ordering albalone and bluefin and the toros coming in and these cuts of steak from different places and these exotic foods. But ultimately, those all come through the food distributor here in Vegas. And so now you have all these off-strip restaurants, right? And a chef that maybe work down on the strip that now has his passion project off strip. Well, he can still get access to that same ingredients. He can offer it at a lower price because he doesn't have the inflated cost of where it's at. And really, it becomes a pure form of the passion of the food. And ultimately, it only exists because of wholesale distribution and how vital that is. And I think if you look at that in proximity to the products you want or the ingredients you want, in this case, I think it's something we all take for granted all the time.
I absolutely agree. I mean, when you mention that, it really kind of sparks some different thoughts. And it's not just, that food industry. I mean, it's easy to look at that food industry because, obviously, perishable product, it's nice to have in one place. But yes, you can look at it in many, many different walks of life or vertical markets.
Yeah, in your world, I mean, guess where I'm buying my wooden boat from if I wanted one? The best wooden boat builders are in Oregon. I wonder why. Access to the wood, so things like that. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. No. And I think that's the message. There's a purpose behind distribution. There's a passion, behind it. And, there's also that desire to bring people up, much like, Monty, and Tyson brought you up into that organization. There is a desire for people to see others succeed in this business. And I think that's just, kind of a wonderful byproduct, but you got to push that message into other people you want to recruit. I mean, and I've had this discussion thousands of times, but I still like to have it, especially with somebody who's younger. How do you want to sell the passion of distribution?
For me, I think about how I go to a lot of either conferences or stuff I'm doing from a continued education standpoint. And I keep hearing this, man, like, how do we attract the youth and how do we get the millennials? And allegedly I'm a millennial, I'm 39 years old. I played outside and I didn't have a cell phone until I was 20. So apparently I'm an elder millennial. So, which I'll take that. But I think being in a place where I can relate to both sides, guys like Monty, man, did they teach me stuff. Guys like Bob Patch taught me incredible things.
Right.
Some of these mentors that I've had over the year, Keith Manis, like incredible things that I learned from them. And it's osmosis that really gives you that. And it's the only way to learn some of these things. You can't really get this out of a book in college. I don't care how much internet access you have. Like, there's just certain things that aren't going to hit there. But now you couple that with what naturally some of the youth has is comfortability with technology, understanding how to skip steps, understanding how to multiply yourself, right? You get a further reach. Why? Well, you understand the digital aspect to that. But I really think like the recruitment tactic for me is like, hey, it's really cool if you want to go be part of a tech company. That's great, but you're going to compete with the best of the best from the best schools, people who have a lot of student loan debt from going to those great schools. And then you have this industry who is just begging for some of this talent to come to it. And when you see that applied there, I mean, gosh, a lot of people are paid from a profit share standpoint. There's a lot of employee-owned companies in our space that are independently owned. There are ESOPs out there that are doing the same thing. I mean, if you look at the commission structure for an outside sales guy for a distribution company, they might as well be on a profit share. It's just structured different. What industry really allows you to have that? And then the most important thing that I say to every one of them is I say, the beauty of being on that kind of pay structure is that there's no ceiling. Sky is the limit. And you want to talk about motivation and what all of these youngsters are asking for. It's that. And it's because they'll Google you. They'll do the math. They see the metrics. They understand what the bottom line looks like. And so where do you lose them? Where do you fail to retain them? Well, I think it's wrapped around how you structure that pay. And then also, doesn't that make everyone feel a part of it? And isn't that the very thing that is a self-fulfilling prophecy from a motivation standpoint? So that's my pitch on it. And that's what I feel like we embody as an organization and that I've embodied as a human. And I feel it in my heart every morning. There's plenty of mornings that I'm like, man, I should really take today off. And the phone starts ringing and I'm right back on it,
Yeah.
Because it feels right. It feels great and it feels rewarding. And not just from a monetary standpoint, but from a pursuit of excellence. I mentioned to you off air, like Nobody ever believes me. I'm not after this for money. There's a lot of things there's easier ways to make a buck,
than the rep agency. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I'll agree with you.
For me, it's I believe in it. I believe in the model, and I'm in the pursuit of excellence for it. I've dedicated my entire professional equity to it. I would never dedicate my entire professional equity to something and not have the plans on being the best at it.
I think that sometimes, people look at the supply chain. They look at, where does that rep agency fall in there? And it's in a very funny space. You have to sell to both your customer, the downstream customer and the upstream manufacturer. So it's a very difficult position to be in, but it can be a truly rewarding position as you're describing right now. And I think a lot of us hear it from a negative standpoint, and it's refreshing to hear this positive spin on it. And there's got to be something good about it because a lot of people stay in it for a very long time.
That's the thing too, is that you have such experience to lean on and such great opportunities for succession, such great opportunities to advance some really already great businesses, but to just add in that extra piece of it that's really going to take it to the next level and make it just blast off. But I say this to people when they think about, because the most common thing I'll get is, oh, well, you're just a middleman. And I go, well, depending on the day, it's either Elon or Bezos, but, Jeff Bezos is a broker. Amazon's a broker. One of the richest guys in the world, he's a broker. And you use him every day.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
And it's like, hey, how'd you buy your house? I don't know, maybe a real estate broker. So I try to get rid of that middleman term, and I prefer broker. And a lot of things are brokered, including everyone's stock portfolios, So it's,
sure.
I think it's a little deeper than that. I think when you look at it from an overall sense, it's like, oh man, this is a high value, and it's a predictable value, and it's a value that only costs if it produces. And I don't know of a better deal.
No, I would agree with you. And I think those who can live in that environment, and not everybody can. I mean, let's just be realistic about this, that not everybody can live off of a commission or a lack of paid vacation or anything like that. Or I don't get PTO days. It just doesn't work that way. But not a lot of people can do that. And so I think there does definitely have to be a mindset.
Yeah.
And there has to be a risk, that risk tolerance to do this without the safety net of that paycheck or whatever that may be. So
it's not for everyone. It is for a lot of us. And I think that's a lot of the outcry that you hear when people go, man, these large corporations just, beating down on us youngsters and not letting us in. And it's like, well, there's opportunities. For me, I love to fish at a fishing hole that not everyone knows about, and I think when you dive into these niche industries, I think that's going to be something that's going to be very attractive. And there's going to be TikToks and Instagrams about. I just read a book called Buy Then Build that spoke specifically about that, finding these niche good companies that are already existing and then putting in processes and injecting some technology and really using that as a growth factor to them. So I think that's what you're going to see be the new entrepreneurial pathway for a lot of folks that are looking for, like, where's my identity and where do I fit in these large corporate structures?
You don't. Move out. Go do your own thing. I think there is a tremendous opportunity, especially wholesale distribution. I mean, obviously that's our world. I mean, that's what we live in. But really, there's so many other ways that people can leave that structured environment, if they so choose, if they want to do that. And in our environment, in the wholesale distribution business, I mean, there is amazing opportunity for growth. And you're right. Maybe we don't have the shiniest shoes, or, maybe we don't, work in the prettiest buildings. But I think that nobody can argue once they're in it. Nobody could argue the opportunities available.
I think that that's the key factor when you're looking at it working both ways. Because I'll tell you, the other part is the cost of entry on that. I talk about we got to earn our hunting license, right? And a lot of the time, people aren't willing to pay for the hunting license to be able to go hunt. And I say that figuratively, meaning that I can't tell you how many times I had to burn my own money not knowing that it would come back just to get my hunting license. And once I got my hunting license, once I got the opportunity, well, now I can start to reel some of that back in. So it actually works both ways, because I'll tell you what, go get a taste of that. And you might decide, man, I really value this structure and what it does for me from a work-life balance standpoint, because it is always there. And I think it's the ultimate thing of like, when you can always work, what ends up happening is you end up working. Then you got to be real intentional about your work-life balance.
You do. No, absolutely. And I think, one of the nice things about being, having those entrepreneurial opportunities and that ability to eat what you kill, I guess I never get in a position where I fear the next job or the next paycheck, because I've over the years learned that I go hunting again. If things aren't going my way, fine, I'm going to go hunting again. And I think that's something that I would love to see more people adopt, is to really kind of take control of their own opportunities and their own destiny in that regard.
For sure. And I think it just becomes this mirror of your value. And I think that we as humans, we're all mirrors to each other, right? And that's the way to approach it, is when you take a look at someone else, either knowing like, hey, if they can do it, I can too. But the other side of that, understanding that, hey, if that person can do that and can have that bravery to say like, hey, if this all fails, well, isn't that the recognition of your own value? And then it's demonstrable and it's measurable as you continue to progress through your career or just your life. And I think that that's such a key factor that sometimes we're missing out here, because we think, man, this is everything. This is everything. And it's like, no. Your knowledge, your experience, your whole story, it has a value because you put effort into it. And isn't that the best security blanket? Isn't that the best safety net? Is that you have value and you can provide it to someone, and everybody's looking for value.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I wanted to touch base, before we wrapped up, about giving back. You've had some great opportunities throughout your life, and so have I, over the years. And I think it's extremely important to find ways to give back to that community that gave to you freely. So I just happened to be teaching a class yesterday, and I look up on this board and I see that you're on this, on this liaison committee, this ESAC committee for the group I was teaching. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's way too many touch points here. Like I was like, okay, I've got an interview with this guy the next day. It just was a very odd deal. But would you mind telling me a little bit about how you got involved, and why'd you raise your hand and say, I want to be a part of this and I want to help further the industry?
I think first and foremost, super grateful for the industry, and I take a lot of pride in it. Ultimately, in giving back to some of that is I've had so much opportunity based around that. And it's Evergreen, what we're speaking about, in the Evergreen Supplier Advisory Council. Yeah. I mean, for one, what a treat for me to sit in the room with some of the titans of the industry on the manufacturer side and the distributor side. Bill Ward, who's been a great mentor and friend to me over the years, he's the president of that organization, and I couldn't have been more excited to go on it. Mike Manis has, man, I feel like he's been on the board in one way, shape, or form for the last 20 years almost.
Everybody gets recycled, man. They get drug into it and they don't get out.
Evergreen was really important to Keith, and Keith was always paid attention to that. No matter how big he got, he always showed up. He always participated. He always put in his input. And so I recognized that too, and wanted to pay some homage to that as well. But ultimately, it's just about how do we push this industry forward? And one of the big factors, and everyone on that committee and that board is tired of hearing me say that I want to tell a better story. We have all these outlets of social media. We have all this digital reach we can make. How do we tell this story better? If we want to recruit talent, tell the story better. I mean, you look in that room and I want to point over, you were just at Formula One in Miami. You were just courtside at the Final Four. Your organization has courtside bull seats. I know you've flown on several private jets. And it's like, well, what do the tech companies do? What do these large corporations do? When they're attracting high-level talent, they float that stuff out there. That's part of the allure. That's part of the package. And I think that we just do a poor job of telling that story at the ground level. I can't tell you the events I've been to, all under the guise of work.
Yes.
For the company. So I really wanted to drive that message home. I really wanted to progress some of the technology internally for all the distributor members. in the group, and even for the manufacturer side. And I think that we often size up as competitors or regions, or I'm in this, we have multiple locations in the same city. And I always appreciated the evergreen message of like bringing that strength together as one. And I think as an entire industry, the more we collaborate, the more we share the stories, the more we share what works. Rising tides lifts all ships. I think that it's really the case when I look at how do I go back? How do I give back? How do I tell the story? Where can I raise my hand? Where can I be of value? And maybe I might just touch some 19, 20-year-old warehouse kid at some point that figures out that he's going to start his own business and ends up on a podcast with you.
There you go. Appreciate that. And I absolutely appreciate you serving on that community. I mean, I'm getting to an stage in my life that, can I still contribute to those? Absolutely. And I love to, but it's really more important that people of your age come in and are contributing ideas. And really, because unfortunately, those of us of a certain vintage, we tend to be nostalgic about, our industry. We start, oh man, things are changing on us. And what we really need are voices of change and people who want to shape this in a different way, and they can see a little bit more clearly about where the direction is and how do we attract more people into the industry. And so absolutely appreciate you stepping up, raising your hand and jumping on, and wish you the best of luck on that. And you'll spend some time with some really amazing people, but you get to be amazing yourself on that committee as well. So
yeah, thank you for that.
Hey, Robert, thank you so much for the time, man. It was just absolutely a pleasure, getting to know a little bit more about your story and just kind of laughing at about all the touch points that you and I have over, these different relationships and whatnot.
It's that 7 degrees of separation, right?
That's right.
of our world. But no, I thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's an absolute honor. I love to brag about our industry. I love to talk about the power of wholesale distribution. And really, it's the people, as well as I do, the caliber of humans that we get to be surrounded with, that we get to go spend time with and really know about their families and have investment in them as humans. I mean, it touches my heart. It makes me emotional. It really, really is this group of just fabulous human beings with great souls. And that means the most to me. And that's like the most attractive part of it. And I think everybody in the industry would echo that.
Absolutely. Well, my man, thanks again. And, I look forward to the next time our paths cross.
Absolutely. Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.